Hello, Cody. Thank you for letting me interview you regarding Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. The purpose of this interview is for you to demonstrate your understanding of the theory and how the theory applies to you and students you currently teach or plan to teach. Question 1. Imagine I have never heard of Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. Briefly explain salient features of Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. What is the source of this information? So, Erik Erikson actually had no formal training in psychology, but in young adulthood, he was a psychoanalyst that studied under Sigmund Freud. So his psychosocial theory was heavily influenced by Freudian work and is an adaptation of Freud's psychosocial developmental theories. The main hypothesis of Erikson's stages of psychosocial development theory is that there are 8 different psychosocial stages in which people experience throughout their lives. Each stage typically corresponds within a specific time frame of the person's life, and each stage consists of a different psychosocial crisis or choice that the person must make regarding a specific issue within their psychosocial development. The psychosocial issues include trust versus mistrust, which is the infant stage, autonomy versus shame and doubt, which is the toddler stage, initiative versus guilt, which is the preschooler stage, industry versus inferiority, which is the school age child, identity versus role confusion, which is adolescent, intimacy versus isolation, which is the young adult stage, generativity versus stagnation, which is the middle adult stage, and integrity versus despair, which is the older adult stage. However, sometimes these crises are not resolved properly, which results in a failure to be prepared to take on new psychosocial issues, as well as constant struggling to deal with these unresolved crises through a person's life. Someone that does not adequately resolve one of these issues may continue to the next stage of development, but it is likely they will continue to deal with problems or consequences from their unresolved crisis. The example given in Slavin's book, Educational Psychology, is an adult that never solves the identity versus role confusion crisis during his teenage years will likely experience a midlife crisis in their 40s and 50s, and they'll go out and buy a sports car or buy a new motorcycle or something along those lines. My main source for this information is Chapter 3 of Slavin's Educational Psychology book, as well as the PowerPoint on Blackboard titled Social and Moral Development. Okay, question number 2. At what stage of development do you see yourself now? Why do you think so? I believe I'm at the young adult stage of development in which intimacy versus isolation is the main choice that I'm struggling with. I believe that I have, for the most part, resolved the troublesome identity versus role confusion psychosocial issue by finally understanding who I am as a person in regards to the mental, social, and psychological, or physiological, rather, aspects of my being. I understand what I want to do with my education and career, and how I can go about achieving these goals that I want to reach. Now that I understand and have adequately answered that issue, I'm ready to take on the challenge of intimacy versus isolation. In the text, Slavin states that this stage is when the young adult is now ready to form a new relationship of trust and intimacy with another individual. I've been dating my girlfriend for about 5 months now, so it is still relatively new, and we're still exploring the different facets of our relationship. I believe this would place me in the early portion of this stage, but so far we've uplifted each other and encouraged growth towards the goals that we have. We're supportive of one another and try to provide as much assistance as we can for each other. I'm also starting to think towards the generativity versus, versus self-absorption stage, and I'll likely be there once I receive my full-time job in the classroom. That'll probably place me around that timeline. In his work, Identity and the Life Cycle, Erikson describes generativity as the interest in establishing and guiding the next generation. So I kind of want to continue to grow into that role as an educator and begin to become a positive inspiration and role model for the next generation. Okay, moving on to question 3 of the interview. Explain how being at this stage of development may influence your behavior and outlook in your classroom. On what do you base this explanation? So being at the intimacy versus isolation stage will influence my behavior because my significant other is supportive of me, my career, and my goals. So I can rely on her as one of my main lines of support. This will allow me to be more relaxed and be myself in the classroom, as I have a solid support system in place to assist me with any struggles or hardships that I may encounter. I'm not saying that there won't be difficulties or hardships that I have to overcome, but I think these will be easier with the network of support that I have surrounding me. The generativity stage will affect my behavior and outlook in the classroom because I'll continue to develop into a positive agent of change within my community. I will likely continue to coach sports as well and build strong relationships with these student athletes, as well as the students in my class and at my school. I base this explanation on chapter 3 of Slavin's text, as well as on the firsthand experiences that I've had growing up. My father was an educator for 30 plus years, so I kind of got to see the relationship that him and my mother had and how they would support each other in their endeavors. Okay, moving on to question 4 of the interview. Identify at what level your students are or are likely to be at in Erickson's stages. So I'll be teaching high school, so my students are likely going to be in the industry versus inferiority stage or the identity versus role confusion stage of personal and social development. And according to the social and moral development PowerPoint provided on Blackboard, those are the correct ages for school age and adolescent children. So I believe that would be the proper placement for them. All right, moving on to question number 5. Explain how being at this stage of development may influence their behavior and outlook in your classroom. On what do you base this explanation? So being at the industry versus inferiority stage of development will likely influence their behavior because they're learning how to develop a sense of self-worth, and refine their skills that they have within the classroom setting. The research study titled Industry versus Inferiority by the University of Detroit's Psychology Department states that this stage marks a child's entrance into society and an opportunity for them to find a satisfying and meaningful role in the world. If successful, they will develop a sense of industry and become successful producers of what is valued by the wider society. So the students know what academic skills they possess, and they're now learning how to best utilize these skills. Furthermore, the identity versus role confusion stage will play an even greater role in the classroom because students are figuring out who they are and becoming their true self. Every action they make kind of affects this choice, whether that may be to complete their assignments and participate in my class or to rebel, skip class, and not complete their work. The PowerPoint on Blackboard describes this stage as adolescents trying to integrate many roles, such as being a child, a sibling, student, athlete, or worker, into their self-image, while also dealing with external forces such as role models and peer pressure. All right, moving on to the 6th and final question of the interview. What might be some disconnects between you and your students, keeping the differences in the 2 stages in mind? So keeping the stages in mind, one disconnect that could occur is that while I have succeeded in finding my own identity and figuring out what I want my career and goals to be, my students may be lost in this process and will feel like they cannot relate, and will feel like I cannot relate to them. In this case, they would reject my help and cease to do work or develop academically. Another disconnect that could occur between myself and my students is that they may reject my role as a positive role model or be influenced by an unhealthy outside factor that convinces them that I am not helpful for them or that they do not need me as a role model. This could cause them to go down the wrong path and become uninterested in my class or in school altogether. Some students may recognize that I have a great network of support and resources to draw from, and they came from a background that didn't afford them this privilege. This may actually cause students to distance themselves from me instead of realizing that I can be an asset of support and a resource for them. That is all the questions I have today, so thank you for your time.